Invisible man there.
Isaac's
Typical me.
Right,
Hey, where you going, bro?
thanks,
No,
thanks, Steve, for coming on, and hopefully some of the Cubs here from Buckinghamshire have got some great questions for you.
Okay, great.
But first of all, just let us know, you're obviously Steve Baker, and you're obviously the MP of Wycombe, is that correct?
That's right, yeah. So it covers, the constituency covers High Wycombe and Lane End, up to Hazelmere and Downley, and up to Ibstone and Piddington, and around the county boundary, Marlow Bottom, but not Marlow. So it's a nice big area. I represent about 75,000 electors, and they write to me a lot. So I've been doing lots of email recently, and I've been speaking in the House of Commons. Just had a couple of meetings with the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I've been in touch. In fact, I've been in touch with the Prime Minister today, if you can believe it.
Whoa!
I asked the Prime Minister a question earlier, and then we had a follow-up on the phone. So it's been a busy old day trying to make sure everybody's looked after.
Wow, there you go. So Steve's had a chat with the Prime Minister and with the Chancellor as well on the special day.
Yep.
And lots of announcements as well.
Yep.
That was one of my questions actually, but I'll come back to that after the Cubs have done theirs.
All right,
Okay.
no hard questions, please.
No
It's too
hard
late.
questions. Well, we shall see. Should we take one at a time? Should we go girls first? On my screen, I've got Isabel first. Isabel, hi.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask Steve a question?
Yes. What do you like most about being an MP?
The best thing about being an MP is meeting people in pleasant environments like this, answering your questions and trying to encourage people and helping people. So, you know, we do hundreds of cases every year where people come to us at their wits' end with big problems, and we help try and solve them. We can't always do it, but probably the best feeling about being an MP is when someone's in despair and you help them out of that problem.
Okay,
But
thank
you can't always do it, but it's always nice to help someone.
Cool.
That's a good question, Isabel. Well done. I like that question. Well done. Joseph, what's your question?
When or how are the live music festivals and venues going to open again?
When are the live music venues going to open again?
Yeah.
Well, I wish I could tell you that. The government doesn't tell us these things in advance, because if ministers tell things to MPs, then MPs tell things to the newspapers. So they haven't actually told us any secrets like that in advance. But I hope it will be as soon as possible. But of course, we're trying to keep people safe as well as protecting their jobs. And it's a difficult set of circumstances, but I hope it will be soon.
Thank you.
So obviously,
Sorry, I can't be more specific.
that's okay. No. Obviously, Joseph obviously likes your music, don't you, Joseph?
Good lad.
Good man. Okay. Well, I've got Isaac. I've got Isaac now, who is the invisible person now in space. Isaac, do you want to ask Steve a question?
Yes, please. Okay. What's the politics?
Say that
What's
again.
politics?
What's politics? Is that what
Yeah.
you asked? Okay.
Well, that's the most important question you could ask me, I expect. What is politics? Politics is about what the law is. And what's the law? The law is a set of rules about what you must do and what you must not do on pain of either fines or imprisonment. And on top of all of that, it's all the way that public services work, the NHS and welfare benefits and so on. But it's about the law. It's about what you're forced to pay for, what you must do and what you must not do. So how fast you're allowed to drive and so on. And then some difficult issues that get very controversial. So, you know, what is a marriage? You know, that was a controversy at one point, and whether or not we go to war. Really, really big and important decisions. Today we've had big announcements about how the Chancellor is going to protect people's jobs and livelihoods after coronavirus. So, but in the end, all of these things boil down to this. Politics is about the legitimate use of compulsion. Does that make sense? Compulsion is the use of force, what people must do. And a lot of my colleagues lose sight of that. But does anybody here want to live in a world without rules? I don't. Rules protect us. But so different people disagree with one another about what we ought to be forced to do and pay for and refrain from doing. And that's really what all the argument is about in politics, is where we disagree about what we should be forced to do. So personally, I don't think the law can put love in people's hearts. I think we've got to choose to love one another and be kind to one another. But some of the problems my colleagues in Parliament want to solve with the law really, in the end, require us to choose to be kind. So that's an area where we perhaps might disagree. So my politics, I believe in the equality of every person, moral, legal, political, that we should be equal before the law, and all the rest of my politics flows from that belief in that equality of every person.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. That's a good question, Isaac. Well done.
It is a good question. I tried to answer it as briskly as possible. I hope that's all right.
That's a tricky one to answer as well. But well done. Well done for that. Alice, can you hear us? Have you got a question for Steve?
Yes. Were you a Cub Scout?
Why am I a Cub Scout?
Were you a Cub Scout, Steve?
No, I wasn't. I'm afraid I wasn't. I was in the Air Cadets when I was younger, and before I joined the Air Cadets when I was about 13, and before that I wasn't a Cub. When I was small, I was quite shy and I wasn't brave enough to go and get involved with Cubs, so I think it's great that you're all involved. And yeah, I became an Air Cadet and I really enjoyed doing that, so I did Air Cadets instead of when I might have otherwise been a Scout. So I really enjoyed that. It was great fun, but a bit different perhaps.
Good question. Well done, Alice. Thank you. Miles seems to have vanished. We'll come back to Miles in a minute. Ben from Loughton. Have you got a question for Steve?
Yeah.
Hello, Ben.
How is it like voting in Parliament? How does it work?
Well, at the moment, it works slightly differently. So I can tell you this. I'm afraid there are 3 ways that it's been working. Normally, have you ever seen the chamber of the House of Commons?
Yes.
Well, it's like a square, isn't it? Or you can see it's like a square, the chamber, and around the outside of the rectangle, there's 2 lobbies, one on one side and one on the other. I ought to draw you a diagram up there, perhaps. No, I won't do that. And what normally you do is you circulate around. So if you're voting aye, you vote on one side by walking through this lobby, and they count you as you leave. And if you're voting no, you walk the other way through. So it's very useful to do that because it means you see all your MP colleagues when you're voting, including all the ministers. So you can be in there, a big crush of people all close together, and see the Prime Minister or the Secretary of State for Health or Education or whoever, and have a quick word with them about your constituents' issues and problems. But we can't vote like that at the moment because it requires us all being squeezed in. So what we've arranged at the moment is we go through very carefully through the same lobbies, but we all go through in the same direction. So we arrive in a socially distanced queue, and then one group goes one way to vote no, and the other group goes the other way to vote aye, and we show our parliamentary passes like this. That's my parliamentary pass. You put it on a card reader and it registers that you've voted, and on you go. And the 3rd way is that while we were getting that system sorted out, we were voting electronically online, which in many ways is great. I once voted for legislation while I was out on a run with my wife, but that's not really the point. So in order to try and show a bit of leadership, we're back in Parliament to vote in person because we're saying to other people it's safe to go back to work, and we do need you to go back to work. And so for that reason, here we are, we're back in Parliament and voting in person. But if one day you want to come and visit Parliament and have a tour when that's possible again, you'd be very, very welcome, and we'll show you how voting works in person in the chamber.
That's great. Well done, Ben. Good question. We are going to be running shortly out of time, so let's go through these. Amelia, have you got a question?
I'll be quick.
Amelia, can you unmute yourself? No? Hold on.
No,
I
won't.
There we go.
What are you doing as an MP to help climate change?
We've got loads in our manifesto about climate change. So this week I've done quite a bit on hydrogen fuel cells. I think hydrogen fuel cells are really important because if you tried to run a train on batteries, they'd be enormously heavy, and that wouldn't be any good at all for a train. And similarly with aeroplanes, trying to run aeroplanes on batteries is very difficult. But if you put hydrogen in the car or in the aeroplane or in the train, and then the hydrogen goes through a fuel cell, then you get electricity with zero emissions. So this week I've been doing a bit of work on hydrogen fuel cells, and the Chancellor mentioned hydrogen fuel cells in his plan for jobs today, and we're going to be investing in that. But the programme we have for government from the last election includes many, many different investments and policies to move us on to a decarbonised economy.
Great. Well done. Good question, Amelia. I like that one. Well done. Well thought out. Great question. Shamika, have you got a question?
Yes, I have.
Go on then.
What education is needed to become an MP?
Well, in the law, no education is strictly needed. If you were to look at what the law says about whether or not you can stand for election, you have to be free of criminal convictions, over the age of 21, if I remember correctly now, but you'd have to go back and check the law. If you look on the internet at the Electoral Commission website, you'll find the rules. And you have to fill in a form to say you'd like to stand, and it has to be signed by 10, I think. I've done it 4 times now, you'd think I'd remember, but it's about 10 people, might be 12, have to say that you're a fit person to stand and they're willing to back you. And once you've done that and paid a deposit, then your name goes on the ballot paper and you've stood for election. Now, realistically, in most places, you need to be a party candidate, and the strict legal requirements are, in a sense, secondary, because you've got to get the party to pick you first. And that's quite complicated and difficult. But once you're a party candidate, and you then fill in the forms and on you go. But you don't have to have a degree. As it happens, I've got 2 degrees. I've got a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering, and I've got a master's degree in computer science, neither of which got anything directly to do with politics, but they are quite useful. I was an aerospace engineer in the Royal Air Force, and then I was in business software. So I've ended up with 2 degrees, but you don't, and I come from a very ordinary background, by the way. My dad's a carpenter. So you don't need any particular background. If you want to be an MP, then you go for it.
Well done. That's a good question as well. Some great questions. Well done. Miles, have you got a question for Steve? Conscious of time as well. So thanks a lot.
All right.
No,
I'm not going to rush you off there.
No, you haven't got a question, Miles? No, that's okay. No problem. All
right.
Shanak, have you got a question?
What does a typical day in the life of an MP look like?
Well, it looks long usually, if I'm honest. So normally I get up at 6 o'clock and leave for work, and normally get into the office about 8 o'clock and answer a good chunk of email, read some papers for meetings later in the day, and meeting, speak in the House of Commons. Maybe if you prepare a speech, you might spend 2 hours preparing a speech and then get 10 minutes to deliver it. Yesterday, the time limit was only 4 minutes, so I spent a couple of hours preparing what I thought was going to be an interesting speech on a difficult topic, and then I had to cut it right down because I was only allowed 4 minutes to speak. So, you know, today I've spoken twice in the House of Commons. So I went in, took a seat, listened to questions about Wales before sitting through and then asking the Prime Minister a question for myself. And then later the Chancellor made his statement and I went into the chamber to ask him a question. That's all very time consuming, just to ask one question. So you can imagine you're here asking me a question, and we've all been on the line for about half an hour. But for me to ask the Chancellor a question, it took about 2 hours because there's so many people asking. So there's lots of things like this, lots of Zoom calls. Sometimes you go on the television. I'm afraid I've done a lot more television than I might have liked. Giving interviews to people, doing research, those sorts of things, managing my staff. So a day is usually very, very busy.
Okay, what I'm going to do is just going to stop there. We're going to play some music, and I'll speak to you offline because there's something I need to do. I'm just going to play some music, and then I'll be back to all of you. Okay, so this.
Hi, I'm Joseph from 4th Aylesbury Cubs, and I love listening to Buck Scout Radio. Don't forget to tune in for songs, games, and fun activities.
So there you go. That's one of Joseph's jingles that he sent to us, and he's probably going to bright red now on the screen. Well done, Joseph. Yeah, I told you I'll play it. I'll play it as often as I like. Well done, good man. Right, okay. So we do have Steve back. There we go. We got Steve back. And,
that's it. The cleaner was coming in to see what was going on there. It's time to clean the office.
Who's in the office? Someone's in the office. Right. Okay. So who didn't answer a question? Was it Theo? Theo, did you want to ask a question to Steve?
Yeah. Did you want to be an MP when you were growing up?
No, I really didn't. It never occurred to me to be an MP when I was growing up. What happened was in the year 2007, I was so fed up with politics and politicians, I thought, you know what, I'll do it myself, because at least then there'll be one vote in the House of Commons I can count on, somebody doing it right, at least in my opinion. And you know what I've learned since? I've learned that politics is very, very difficult, because very, very few people agree with each other on everything. Have you noticed that? I bet you have. So that's why people do it so badly, not because they're bad or stupid people, but because it's very difficult because everyone disagrees. So yeah, I didn't always want to be a politician. I actually don't like conflict. I'm not an extrovert. I find it quite uncomfortable to be in front of a crowd or whatever. So yeah, it's a funny thing for me to do. So yeah, I've always wanted to be an engineer, but I would say to you, don't limit yourselves on what you want to be and become. You just dream big and then do those things.
Okay.
I think you were you in the army before you were?
Oh, wash your mouth out.
I can't remember.
I was in the Royal Air Force. I'm going to get you a picture of me in the Air Force.
Royal Air Force. I did do some sort of homework, but obviously not very good homework.
Here I am. This is me in the Royal Air Force.
Ah, there you go.
There I am. That's me in North Norway with the Jaguar Force. So yeah, I was a Royal Air Force engineer officer. And that's me. I've got the same hair look almost still now. That's from 20 years ago.
The same outfit as well. So there you go.
Yeah, so yeah, I worked on Jaguars and Tornado components. I led teams up to 110 people, up to 19 aeroplanes, usually more like 9 or 10. But it was great fun, lots of fun.
Now you're an MP. Great. Okay. Does anyone else want to ask a question? Put their hands up. Anyone else who hasn't really asked who wants to ask another question?
Go on, you ask me anything.
Oh, go on then, Shanuk.
Being an MP, are you allowed to take any holidays?
Yeah, well, yes and no. It depends who you ask. So if you ask my wife, definitely yes. But if you ask some of my voters, definitely no. But I tried to take sensible holidays, but, you know, we've all just had our holidays cancelled, haven't we? I was going to go away at Easter for a couple of weeks, walking in Cumbria, and that got cancelled like everybody else's holidays. So I'm looking forward to going walking in North Yorkshire, on the North Yorkshire moors in August. But I normally, well, gosh, I don't know. I'd like to think how much time off I get. I normally work 6 days a week, so, and probably sometimes 7. So I don't. It's not a very normal life.
We all deserve a holiday, so I'm sure that at some point you'll get away to the holiday. I'm sure you will.
I will get a holiday, I'm sure. Yeah, I don't want to be moaning.
We'll have 2 more questions because I know that Steve's also got.
I can see there's loads of hands waving now. 3, 4 hands waving.
We'll have 2 more questions because I know Steve's got to shoot off somewhere else. So Amelia, you're the first one up.
MP, what do you do?
Beg your pardon, I didn't quite catch that.
As an MP, what do you do?
What do I do? Well, let me show you. I've got a list here from a presentation that I do. So there's about 7 things. The first and most important, can you tell me what you think the most important thing is MPs do? I talked about it earlier.
Politics.
Well, yeah, it is politics, but what did I say politics was about? Begins with L. Begins with L, ends with?
Laws.
Laws, yeah. So the first thing is making and amending and improving and stopping the making of laws. And what does Boris do?
Politics.
Well, yeah, he does, but he runs the government, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So my job as a backbencher is to scrutinise the government, and that is sometimes uncomfortable because I'm also in the Conservative Party. So ministers don't like being scrutinised by other Conservatives, but that's one of my jobs as well. Representing the interests of my constituents. So when people in Wycombe have got problems, lots of people in Wycombe work for airlines and airports, so standing up for them. Supporting a party in an effort to govern, that's one of the things on this list. Advancing causes in Parliament, whether they're national or local. So improving the NHS has been a big one for me. Liaising with and scrutinising devolved assemblies and councils. And the last one on the list is casework. And I mentioned casework earlier. That's helping people when they really need it. So that's broadly what we do. But Parliament is like a pressure cooker for our society. A police officer told me that. And I'm like the safety valve on that pressure cooker. So people bring all sorts of problems to their MP, and you can't always solve them, but they can always talk about it. It makes them feel better sometimes.
Great, thanks, Amelia. That's a good question. One more, and we'll have. Is that Alice down there? Alice?
I've got Catherine and Shamika both trying to ask questions.
Yeah, I think Catherine is Alice. I think as well. I
beg your pardon.
Yeah. Can you unmute yourself? There you go. Now the last question, and then we'll let Steve go. Okay. Come on, Alice.
If you were in a pop group, who would you be?
Oh, that's a hard question. I didn't know I was coming on here to answer hard questions like that. If I was in a pop group, who would I be? Well, I'd probably be Angus Young in AC/DC. But that group's far too old for you. That's showing my age there. I'm getting thumbs up. Angus Young wearing shorts and a school cap and playing the guitar, probably.
Good choice.
So they've all got to know. Go away and look up AC/DC.
No, don't do that.
And find out who that person is.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you ever so much for coming on to the radio here and taking all the questions from the Cubs here from Buckinghamshire. You've been a very brave man, and they had fantastic questions, and you've taken it really well. Well done.
Thank you very much indeed, everybody. It's really nice to see you. Nice to see you. Look after
so
yourself. Thanks, Steve. Very much. Bye.
And I hope, Steve, we'll see you around in scouting some other time, and there might be some more questions for you. Thank you ever so much, guys. You've been a fantastic question board. You've been fantastic. Well done. Thanks ever so much. You actually answered. You put your questions to him really well, and I think he actually answered them really well as well. So well done. A big clap for you all. Well done.
Yeah, bye.
Remember, you can do this again. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.